All right, guys. So I'm here with a very close friend of mine, Robert Miller. He is here for funnel hacking, so he stopped by the office to hang out. We also have some business. We'll talk a little bit about how that got started and stuff like that. But what's up, man? How are you?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Rob and I have known each other now for about a year and a half, 2 years. About a year. It'll be a year next month, actually.
Yeah, 1 year.
Yeah.
Official anniversary.
Crazy how time flies. Feels like forever. But yeah, we met at a Powerhouse event. We were doing a preview. That's one of the ways that we bring people into Powerhouse. He came to the event. He was in Austin, hung out. He had a couple of agencies. I'll let him kind of talk about that. And now he's crushing it with one of his companies. And I had another agency that I was kind of taking almost, I was going to stop it, and I just kind of converted it in with him because he's an amazing operator, and it just made a lot of sense for us to do that. And that's called Creator Agency. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. But why don't we get started with you telling us a little bit about just kind of like your story and how you ended up here.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy story. It's a pretty great intro. So I first got into digital marketing maybe about 5-6 years ago, and it really actually started with reading Russell Brunson's book, .com Secrets. So it's kind of cool to be here, flash forward 3 to 4 years later. Now I'm on Funnel Hacking Live. Yeah, getting awards and all that stuff, pretty cool. But I was a funnel internet baby. So I went through Grant Cardone's funnel from book all the way to working with the guy. That was actually after a series of different people I was helping in the marketing space and stuff like that. So after I worked with him and did a lot of marketing with him and Frank Kern, I then dropped off and made my own agency. And then flash forward after 2 years, had 2 different agencies, one for personal brands, one for entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, and then another one for e-commerce. And during 2021, scaled that thing up really, really fast, and then converted it into what we're doing now, which is more of a model where we control the stores rather than going and getting a bunch of clients and having to fix their issues with their stores. And then that's when we decided to create Creator, which is basically the entrepreneur agency that kind of got me started in the whole space anyway. So over the past 5 years, been in digital marketing, and I've basically seen every offer under the sun, and I haven't sold adult toys or CBD, and I don't plan on doing that anytime soon. So
yeah, it's crazy that that CBD even works so well in adult. Man, I've never sold. Actually, I think we have a client for one of Roddy's businesses that's adult toys, but we don't sell that. But before that, what were you doing?
Before that, I was going to college for finance, and I had stumbled into cryptocurrency in around 2015, 2016. So back then, I kind of come from like a blue collar area just north of Los Angeles called Simi Valley. And a lot of people didn't know what cryptocurrency was. I mean, a lot of people didn't know what Facebook was, let alone that whole system, right? So I'd gotten into Bitcoin.
In 2015?
Yeah.
Damn.
So the way I got into Bitcoin, my brother started getting into, or actually met a guy who was like into the dark web type stuff. And so it wasn't necessarily like he was buying anything illegal or anything. He was just like really into the Tor network and just a bunch of files that were being shared there.
Yeah.
And then that's how he got started into Bitcoin. And so at the time, the first interaction that my brother had with him, he had 1,500 Bitcoins.
What did it cost?
He got them for pennies, dude. He was with RuneScape. He was like super early on. And then he just kept talking more and more about it. And this is when my brother and I were really just introduced to the whole concept of what it was. And the last conversation that we had with him was 15,000 Bitcoins that he had during that time. And then after the whole run up, we saw his wallet address. He had, it seemed like hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins because he was just collecting them and all that kind of stuff and buying them. And then he just kind of vanished. Like no one heard from this guy ever again. So it's like this mystic figure that kind of got us into Bitcoin. But I really went down that rabbit hole because it was way more interesting than college and the classes I was learning there. And I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what was, my skill sets and stuff. I was super introverted. So the idea of like rallying behind something on the internet that was, an introverted thing, I fell in love with. So I went deep into cryptocurrency. I wrote books on cryptocurrency, just teaching friends and family how to do it. People were then sending me money on, to trade for them and stuff. And so I had like a mini hedge fund. And then flash forward 2017, run up, boom and bust. I basically sold everything and gave everyone their money back and everything. We made some money, we did well, and then I just took all that money and dumped it right into education. So the Grant Cardone courses, the trading and stock courses, internet marketing courses, like I bought everything to figure out what my next chapter was going to be. And then from there, marketing was really the next one for me. So that's where I really went deep into that.
Let's talk about education for a second because, we're kind of in the education space. Everyone that's in internet marketing or has some sort of online business gets the offers, right? Like, hey, learn how to do this, learn how to do that. And I shot a video where my belief is, it's totally okay. It's weird because you can go to college and get a liberal arts degree and it's 50, 60K. You can do something else and you're 100K, right? And you're totally cool with that. There's no guarantee. There's no job. There's no even like understanding of a trade. You're just learning very basic stuff to get a very basic job to then move forward unless you do continuing education or whatever. And then that's still not guaranteed, right? But people, because I want to talk about your mindset, like a lot of people will buy something for $500, $1,000, even $30, all the way up to $1,000, $10,000, whatever the case is, right? And if their results aren't in 7 minutes from something they don't know, they're learning and they haven't even technically applied, they're furious, right? So you could have gone, everyone can go either way, right? Like I'm a big believer that it's my fault if I'm good at it or I'm not good at it, or if I bought something, did I apply it? Like clearly it worked for this person. It's not saying that it's going to work for you, but it will work for you if you have enough time horizon and you apply the thing. You know, if you lose enough times, you're basically business is losing and then winning, you know? So what was your mindset prior to that? And when you were going through all these education stuff, why did you not have that victim mentality?
Because I was hungry, man. Like literally hungry.
But everyone's hungry, and I think they use the hunger as like, some use the hunger as a driver, and some use the hunger as a deterrent.
Well, I think coming from like where I grew up, my mom and I, you know, I was raised by a single mother. She was making like 30, 40 grand a year living in LA, in a suburb of LA. So like when I was saying I was hungry, I was like literally hungry, like physically hungry. Like we had gone nights where, you know, there was food on the plate and sometimes there weren't, and it wasn't the best of food, whatever the case is. And so I remember like even throughout high school and even when I was getting into college, you know, I was in the food lines for when they would do like the free food donations, or I would do FAFSA money and I would just use that for food. And that's how I actually got through college was off of the FAFSA stuff. So I'm super grateful for it. But like I had no intention of being necessarily a digital entrepreneur that's been able to do the things that I've done now. But it was literally like, I know I need skill sets. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad in second grade through to my brother. He put me on in entrepreneurship. So I knew there was some little way out, whatever that was. And I really was keen in business. I was really like determined about it. And so I was just a sponge, man. Like I knew I had to get around certain mentors. So, you know, you actually met my first mentor, Wences, which really put me on to the whole digital marketing, you know, thinking on how to connect yourself to revenue and just giving the right mental frameworks of what to do. And so then when, you know, he was a large influence in some of the education that I had bought. I had spent like 50 grand in education, stocks, crypto, marketing, to try and figure out what the games that were available for me were and what I could play. I didn't have a lot of capital. Well, after the crypto I did, but then I spent it on courses. But I didn't have the trading aspect in the very, very beginning. After I started making some money, I then got back into trading and did a little bit of that. Just wasn't my game. I kind of felt more of an interest towards marketing and being able to help create the narratives and then actually have that be a conversion. And so, but I think everything has its own place. And so for me, it ended up just being figuring out what was the thing that I could apply myself to, that I can do on my laptop at home while I was actually, you know, full-time at, you know, part-time jobs and full-time in school and all that kind of stuff. So I've just always been a driven dude. Like I haven't really had any excuses, especially when I was working at Grant's office. I was doing it remote while I was full-time in college. And so I was working 4 a.m. to midnight every single day between his office and school. Wow. So like,
how old were you?
I was 19 at the time.
Damn.
So like I've never really had an excuse to not put in the work. And I think that's also been a detriment in the beginning, which was I would take upon everything, you know, to myself to do it and not delegate it out. But it also made me a bit more versatile in being able to solve certain problems and troubleshoot things. But I think that's just either a gift that I have to be able to handle that bandwidth and stress, or it's just, you know, the predicament that you're in, how bad you really want to get it.
I think that just comes from being poor. I'm the same way. Like, just like you're so terrified. You're like, I'll just figure it out. Like I don't know if I can give you time or extra money or anything, but if I just do it, like I just won't sleep. Who cares? You know? And then you unfortunately carry that energy into like not knowing how to delegate, not knowing how to kind of like build the business side of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then the trust of even like letting go of some of that stuff.
Because you're so scared.
Yeah.
Well, dude, so how did you end up in Austin in Powerhouse?
So it's funny. I was living in San Diego during the time because there was a massive COVID discount on like cool apartments and cool places. Nice. So when COVID had hit, I was growing the first agency, which was a personal brand one. And I'd gone down to San Diego to kind of celebrate because we had been putting a lot of work in during COVID. Then from there, I didn't really want to go back to my old environment because I loved being able to just be free. I finally like achieved in my own way escape velocity of getting out of that situation. I started having a good network, and people, like, money was actually coming pretty easily considering the results were coming in for the clients that we were doing. People were sending us referrals. Like, there was this whole thing after Cardone's agency shut down. Like, this guy came from Cardone. Like, there's a whole little bit of family in that too, So some of it was luck that came to that, but thing was just mindset and like doing something new. And so I was actually scared to move to Austin, but I had done it because I wanted to be around people that I could actually connect with. And Austin being an internet marketing hub. Yeah. I mean, when I got there, the first like 6 to 7 months were a little bit more entrapping because I was just a hermit in my spot and I was just working on the business, yada, yada. But then when the pop-up event came, I actually joined the mastermind prior to the pop-up because I had an e-commerce agency. It was an e-commerce event. I'm like, this is a no-brainer. But I had jumped in, and then that's where I had met my buddy Evan, who actually was in the same building as me, and I walked into him a couple times, but didn't actually even know that was the interest that he had. So that event not only sparked a lot of business relationships, which we'll talk about how we got together and everything, but a lot of friendships in Austin. And then Austin really became home to me because that's just, the people, my people are there, internet marketers, young hustlers, all the different kind of masterminds or events or dinners that we've been able to go to are super fruitful and like filling in my life compared to how it was in California.
That's awesome, man. So what's your experience been in it being in Powerhouse? It's
been very, very helpful, but you were talking about earlier education, that there's different, points of when someone's actually going to have it applied to them, how it's actually going to make sense, or at what stage do you join something, right? Because I think that's also something to consider.
Right.
When I had bought in all the courses, I kind of just figured out, in Hormozi's analogy, figuring out all the links and how those links are actually assembled and how they're actually put together and which ones you're missing.
Right.
And so a lot of the courses and programs that are out there, they just teach you the tacticals, which are those links, but not the actual like boat or the ship of where it's actually going,
right?
Or how to navigate that. And so when joining Powerhouse, a lot of great education in the e-commerce space and the marketing space, et cetera. But the biggest thing for me was the Fly-In Fridays, being able to connect with you guys specifically because when you're not being guided, sometimes it's that, the dog holding its own leash going, you don't know if he's on the right path or not.
Right.
And so when we had a Fly-In Friday, that was the biggest shift in dynamics that I've had, because I had an agency that was going through some troubles and some pains. Then I had this other business and offer that was doing well. And you're like, dude, you have to scrap this. You have to give up this in order to get this, which can be this. And you won't be able to do that unless you actually get rid of it and get rid of the ego, get rid of the pride, get everything that you had to basically, find identity in prior and actually shift it. And that's not a normal conversation. It took a lot longer to actually develop that out and figure out what the core root was. But that's the caliber of being able to identify that. And then also the care and the trust, man. Like, there's a lot of agency owners or coaches or consultants, they don't actually care about the end result of the people. It's about what they're getting, not what the other person's going to be getting and how their life's transformed. And you, Josh, the whole team has been very helpful in that, not only transition, but supporting the whole growth of the journey. So I have nothing but great things to say about you guys, Powerhouse, and the whole community around it.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, and I remember where we were sitting. We were at the taco joint, and I remember telling you that, and you're like, oh, and I was like, listen, dude, like, you got to kill this business, and you got to scale the other one. And I think the other one was not doing great, just because of your overhead, and the other one was doing pretty good. I forgot the number, but how much has it grown since?
Yeah, so the first one, I just had a bunch of overhead, which just had a multiple 7-figure run rate. So I was doing like anywhere between 120 to about 200 was our highest, I believe, on that one. We just had a lot of bodies. And then the second one, that one was just crossing 7 figures, and just in the past 7 months, we've done an additional 2.4 in top line. And so that's just been from shifting, focusing, and literally we've done more in 7 months than we did the whole year prior of building that other business model. And it just came from the mental shift. And that's why we're here in Orlando getting some awards, going on stage and all that stuff. So it's very helpful.
That sparked a great relationship between you and I over the year. And as you scale that business, you had a little bit more flexibility in time. And I know you were talking to me, you're like, dude, we should do something, blah, blah. And like, we just couldn't find the right thing. I had another agency that I had frankly not paid a lot of attention to because I had a different management team kind of like running it as I was growing Powerhouse and other things. And as that kind of, started dwindling, I was going to shut it down. And then I called you and I was like, dude, so listen, I have one thing. I have this idea. It's kind of already existing. I don't want to keep it there. I just want to rename it, restart, fresh team, fresh everything. And I think you'd be the best person to do it with. And we started that. And that is, that's only, kind of like the switch over has been only about a couple of months, not even 3. And we're already on track to, that's going to be a very scalable company called Creator Ads. Why don't you tell the people a little bit about what we do there?
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point too, the way that we're building that, the only way that I could have built this one to be kind of how the previous agency was, is if I didn't go through that death of that business to then, what I had to build to execute on the next one, which is then building a lot of the foundation structure to this one. So Creator Ads, is working with personal brands, entrepreneurs, high ticket coaches, consultants, high ticket offers, info products, anyone that really has a business and then wants to amplify their personal brand and have profitable acquisition, but then the systems in order to do so. And so what people don't really talk about a lot in the advertising space is, it's the ad. Sure, there's strategy of the messaging and the copy. Like a lot of people already understand those basics, but it's how does the system actually handle the stress? And how do you actually know when to turn ads off or when to keep them going, or how the LTV of those products go? And so that's really hard, especially in the ad space, considering you're only looking at front end, either the first cost per acquisition and the actual revenue that you're getting. But how does that actually impact the rest of the business functions and units? And should you actually accept that offer? Like, is it even worth that client? Is it even worth that sale? And so I really had to learn how to financially model, do operational expansion planning, and all that stuff from this newer venture that I did from the conversation we had. And that's built a lot more of a templatized structure that I think is extremely missing in the agency space, coaching space. All the people that I've worked with over the past few years, which we've worked with like hundreds of brands and a lot of the personal brands that are out there, that's typically the missing element of either creating uncertainty into the client, creating uncertainty into the media buyer, the person that's actually running the ads, or even what the next step should be. And it's like setting out that right foundation first before you go launch the campaigns that will then give you that certainty. And that's how I've been able to continue to reinvest. Because, when you're spending 6 figures a month, like I have on an offer that is, I wouldn't say newer, but that you're new to finding pride or enjoyment in, that could be scary. And so as you pivot different offers, as you do a lot of stuff, that's part of, what personal brands are all about. You can launch any business, you can have the authority, as long as you've built out the product and the service behind it, you can essentially sell anything as long as you believe in it. It's not breaking your reputation. It's not just, a fake product. So, really understanding that dynamic shift and what was needed to bridge the gap between me being a content creator, having the following that I do, and having the campaign structure and knowledge that I do. How do I bridge that to make it essentially like a business in a box when it comes to running any campaign?
Where do you think, from working with, and it's kind of a two-part question, so because you're in e-com and the personal brand space, so where do you think as founders in the e-commerce space, people are going wrong right now in decision-making or lack of thought process? And same question pretty much for the personal brands.
I think it's how they look at data and infrastructure, because the attribution softwares are great. Specifically in the e-commerce space, it's a lot more, I think, on the video side than people really understand. I think, at least from my perspective, when I was working with the agency or working as an agency, helping a lot of brands, they didn't invest enough in the different hooks and angles. They would think that one customer avatar could be basically blanketed across with 3 different creatives and then just kind of mass produce those, where the actual volume came from split testing the different angles and hooks. And it does require capital, resources, and energy and time, but those elements of actually the wide testing to then reshape the different creatives in a functional way, I think that's probably missing. And then looking at the data behind how the creatives and the hooks and the angles actually worked, and then along with looking at the financial modeling with lead times with logistics and all that kind of stuff, actually seeing, can you handle the scale? I think those are the 2 biggest things, the front end and then the financial modeling on the back end.
Yeah, I think companies in general just don't have a logical time horizon of testing and having a budget. And that really even stems all the way down to not having a true quarterly plan or how many people do you talk to? You're like, what are you doing? Running ads? How much? I don't know. Like, what do you want to do next? More? Like, what's the number? Like, what's your budget? You know what I mean? Like, no one really thinks like that. And so then they don't have hey, we should test YouTube. Yeah, I guess. Well, what's the budget? Like, what's the goal? What's that? They don't have that, or so they'll be like, let's test 5K. And then it doesn't work off 5K, which it probably won't, right? It's new. Everything is new. And then they just give up. And then like, nothing's working. Like you didn't give anything a normal amount of time. You didn't give anything a process or a actual time to run as a campaign. You can't even do postmortem on something because you killed it before it was even born. And you really didn't have a goal for this whole thing. You just said, hey, more. And that's a lot of, too, like when you were working with agencies and stuff like that, like as an entrepreneur, it's your fault. Sure, it's a lot of other people's fault, and there's cooks in the kitchen. I get it, but realistically, if I go to Robert and I'm like, hey, dude, I want to run this. Cool, yeah. So spend money, and I want to make money. That's really what they're saying, right? There's no rhyme, reason, there's no goal, like there's no understanding of like the numbers, what I want these goals to be for my cost per acquisition, clicks, etc. Like, a baseline of like applications and things like that. And so it makes it hard. And I think that entrepreneurs need to get a little bit tighter with their numbers because it's their business.
100%. I couldn't agree more, especially having the right mindset of what assumptions am I making when I'm opening up a new channel, or what assumptions am I making from my current channel, current acquisition with platform, process, or people that can actually transfer over. And so a lot of the times, like people don't think about the CPMs that are going to be volatile or variable. Even distribution, if a page goes down, you typically have to pay to get that back, or you have to figure out how to get that back after, different services. So there's other variables that people sometimes don't account for. I think when it comes to that operational expansion planning, in fact, even the cost of revenue. So what is that break-even MER, break-even ROAS that you're willing to do on a certain offer, on a certain channel, or even like what is the cost if you're in a service-based business? Like what is the cost per dial? What is each call actually costing you for your showings? Like if you're not getting a good show rate, that's actually costing you money. And is there a follow-up sequence there to then bring down your cost per booking and showing? So, I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of the add to cart and or email abandoned cart flows and SMS flows for e-commerce, but it kind of is the same mechanism. It's just understanding what those costs actually are. And you didn't say it, or you couldn't even say it better when it comes to just doing more. Like you actually have to model it out, because if there's no target, you're just shooting blanks.
Right. There is no more if we don't know what the beginning of that is. You know what I mean? I know you got to get going because you've got the ClickFunnels thing going because you're getting your award. So congratulations on that. But before we go, anything that you want to say or anything that you think is younger entrepreneurs are thinking that you can kind of tell them to stop, like that the mindset of a young entrepreneur sometimes can be a little naive and not, not mature enough to like a lot more ego driven stuff. So anything that you can say to entrepreneurs that are kind of coming up?
Yeah, for sure. Read more books around business leadership, about data dashboards and expansionary planning, and then get your ass in the room, whatever that cost is, whether that's a financial cost to actually get into the room for something like Powerhouse or for other masterminds and people that you want to emulate, or two, if it's going to cost you time or cost you other resources that aren't necessarily tangible, but you want to understand that you're going to be building leverage over your life, building leverage in assets and skills. So you always want to invest into yourself there with books, mentorships, coaches. The next thing is going to be what can you actually put as an input and get maximum output with. And so for me working with someone like Los, the leverage I was able to bring to that relationship and table was I had a lot of the systems infrastructure from the tacticals that I've built, but then also being able to port that over from the experience that I've had from the skill sets that I've acquired. So those doors will actually start opening and the opportunities will start arising. You just have to be committed to, I would say, investing in the skill sets, which is like chapter 1 of entrepreneurship, getting the actual skill sets down. Yeah. 2 is dropping your ego, get into the room. And then 3, really just journal, write notes, like continue to reference where you were. Because it will click one day. I think one of the biggest things that Grant taught me was all assets will become liabilities. I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. I'm from an accounting, I took accounting classes from finance. I'm like, that makes 0 sense. What the hell are you talking about? And then as I've grown in entrepreneurship, and I've had one business where we had that conversation, the asset that I was building was then a liability because of XYZ reasons. And then you start to see that the connection points of different mentors, what they said, what their frequency was, and what they actually meant during that time wasn't how you interpreted it back in the day.
Right.
Even though you've invested all that money, and you may say, "Oh, that didn't work." No, it's that you weren't in the slot or the position in which to receive that information. Like if I spoke to Bill Gates right now and he gave me some information and some advice, I do not have the same leverage that he does to be able to implement that. It just doesn't make any sense. And it could be a simple philosophy switch.
Right.
But I'm not at that stage yet, and I'm growing towards that. But I think it's understanding that it's not going to happen overnight. Continue to invest in yourself, the skill sets, get your ass in the room, and then really just be around the people that, if whatever industry that you're in, there's going to be some natural gatekeepers or some natural people that are already at the top. See how you can collaborate with them. See how you can partner with them and actually provide value, and not just try and take from their pie. Just help make the pie bigger and actually give back.
Well, dude, this is amazing. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, best way to connect is on Instagram at the Robert J. Miller. I got Facebook, YouTube, all that stuff, but Instagram's the main profile.
Awesome, brother. Thank you for coming, and thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe, join the notifications, and share this with a friend that wants to hear this or needs to hear this because it's important to them. Thank you guys, and we'll see you soon.
Peace.